Welcome, mere mortalites, to another round of the conversations. Today I have a repeat guest. It's Erika de Pellegrin. And so if you go back to Mere Mortals number 13, it was actually called Interviews back then. You can hear some of that. But essential quick bio, host of The Balance Theory, founder of ESFit, lawyer by day, PT by night. I think do you dream of being Superwoman as well?
I do actually. How did you know? Thank you so much for having me back on. It's nice to be chatting a year down the track.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been almost, I think it was August last year that we chatted. So it's actually, nice
Bang
to,
on.
we'll do like a yearly recap or something. We can do it every year.
Sounds
Make
good.
a party out of it.
Sounds good.
So since it's so funny because like I completely forgot a bunch of the things we talked about. So just as a recap of that last one, and so we avoid talking about the exact same thing. So in that one, we talked about your experience as a PT, getting body scans, the three core principles of what you've started with the balance theory. So that's the health, relationships, and fulfillment, and sort of why you created that. And then there was a lot about goal setting and implementing of plans. So if you're interested in any of those things, I would suggest going to the number 13. If you just type Erika de Pellegrin in Spotify or wherever you're at, you'll find her pop up there on the Mere Mortals. So today I wanted to go more into about podcasting and maybe just some personal questions as well. So
sure.
Yeah, we'll jump into it. Can just to kick us off though, could you give us an overview of your three categories?
Yeah, sure. So thanks so much for that intro. And like I said, so nice to be back. So the balance theory, I guess, and the whole reason I started the podcast was because I felt like the metric of work-life balance was just not adequate enough for everybody to relate to in terms of their own balance. And I felt constant guilt. I felt a constant ceiling in terms of how I was fitting into that blueprint, shall we say. And so I started to think a little bit deeper. I think there's more to living than work and life. And the reason I don't like that metric either is because it kind of puts work in this negative light, like, oh, that's whatever, just got to get it done, that's work, and life is this really enjoyable thing. But really, work can be quite enjoyable depending on what you do, especially if it's something you're passionate about, and life isn't all rosy either. And so again, that metric for me just wasn't hitting it. And so I sat down and I thought, okay, there are so many frameworks for looking at the way we structure our lives, all the things that are embodied in our lives, but what is most important? Because I don't really like complicated frameworks. I feel like sometimes you just end up getting lost trying to understand the framework and you miss the whole point of what it's trying to achieve, right? So I was like, simplicity is key here. What are the three most important areas of our life if I could categorize them into that? And I thought health is absolutely number one. Within that is your physical and mental, spiritual, emotional, all those things combined in your health. Then you have your relationships, which is obviously so important. And that encompasses all of your family, friendships, love, all those kinds of things that fill that social part of your life. And the last area I actually changed just before I started. So it was called work. And then I really put my critical cap on and I was like, well, I've been super critical of this whole work-life balance theory. Am I going to stick with using work as the third area? And I thought to myself, who does that exclude? And that doesn't include people who are studying full-time mums, which really is a full-time job when you think about it. But by the ordinary metric of work, didn't really fit that category. So I changed it to fulfillment. So we've got health, relationships, and fulfillment. And I guess the whole concept is as long as you've got your foot in each of those areas to whatever degree feels right for you at that point in time, that is your balance. So if it means you've got just enough in your health to keep you kind of sane and healthy, but the majority of it is in your fulfillment category because, you haven't had kids yet and you're running two businesses and really trying to establish yourself. And then, you just make enough time for your relationships and that is your balance. And the whole point is to not feel guilty that it's not a 50-50 split or a 30-30-30 split or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be equal. It's a changing concept. And the way you attribute your time in each of those areas is unique to you and whatever part of your journey that you're on. So I kind of hope that framework empowers people to sort of own their balance a little bit more and think a little bit more critically about, okay, yeah, I know I'm kind of not seeing my friends as much right now, but I'm still at least seeing them once a week, which is enough to soothe that social part of my soul. But I know that right now I need to be more in my fulfillment area or my health needs my attention more, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, nice. The problem with work, I discovered this a while ago when there was a presidential candidate in the US, and God knows why I was into US politics for like half a year and then just went, God, what am I doing? But he was talking a lot about the universal basic income, and one of the good things about that would be it captures those people who aren't in a typical what you'd call work situation. So like you said, the stay-home mum, and they provide so much value to society. Their job is essential. It's critical. Everything that happens is because in 20 years time, we've got another generation coming through and they go into the workforce and whatnot. So I definitely, I think I repeated this last time, but changing that to fulfillment is definitely a better thing, because if you'd labeled it work, I probably wouldn't have even tuned into your podcast. I probably would have been like, well, this isn't for me, because I'm podcasting. I'm not, working per se.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a good decision.
Thank you. And no, I definitely know what you mean. Like that, the phrase work has this like negative connotation in ways, and it's almost like you automatically in my head, I think hard work, long hours, like career, like all these things sort of just go hand in hand with the phrase work. Maybe that's just the society or the situation I've been brought up in. But yeah, I just thought we need to reframe the way we look at it too, right? Because work at its infinite final detail is a fulfillment, right? And whether it is just fulfilling a financial need or a passion, it doesn't matter. It's still a form of fulfillment. So I think that change is really important to also the way we associate with our work and what we're doing, because that really does underpin, I guess, your why and the way you see your purpose and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So you started in May of 2020. So it's been a year and a quarter now.
Mid-ish.
Yeah, mid-ish. What have you learned about yourself from doing a podcast for a year and let's just say a year and a half?
Yeah, good question. And I actually didn't even think it would take me down the road it has. But I almost see podcasting as like a bit of a self-development tool, because I mean, I'm sure you would know, and anyone else listening that's a podcast host would know this. You are really put outside of your comfort zone so many times. Like I still get nervous before I interview guests sometimes, and I think far out, I've been doing this like every week for like a year and a half. Like, does this ever get better?
Not only that, why won't you learn?
Yeah. But it really does. It's a self-development thing in the sense where I'm constantly learning parts about myself that I don't think I would have explored had I not done the podcast. So, just skills of how to reach out to people or pitch myself or come up with concepts and tie them together in a really digestible way that relate to what I'm talking about balance. It's like, I like to see it like little uni assignments or little projects. And they really bring out that creativity in me. Like I never looked at podcasting as a creative thing. My just as a quick tangent, like my sisters and my mum are so creative. Like they're the artists in the family, the musicians. And growing up, I never had any of those like artistic qualities. Like I could draw, but it wasn't like anything impressive. And like I played an instrument because my parents made me, but I dropped that the second I could. And also thought I was too cool for band camp anyway. But so growing up, I was like, I'm not the creative one, I'm more like academic. My heads are in the books. I'm more like articulate. And so moving into podcasting, I thought that's the way I'm going to explore and kind of strengthen that skill. But I didn't realize how creative you have to be in a podcasting space. So it's sort of shown me that I do have a really creative side as well, which I've really enjoyed. And yeah, as I mentioned, like a self-development tool, because you constantly got to critique yourself. And I think the first time you have to listen to yourself is so cringeworthy. And people like, I know when I have like friends and family on and I'm like, oh, did you listen? They're like, no, I don't want to listen to myself. Like, that's so weird. Like the process of listening to yourself and thinking, okay, I could do that better, or I like what I said there and I should probably like strengthen this part, or, up my interviewing skills. You're constantly having to work on that self-refinement in ways, because at the end of the day, you're putting out a product that you want. Essentially, like the episodes are a product, right? I kind of put my business cap on sometimes when I'm looking at my podcast, and I think you are the face behind the product. And so you've got to engage in that self-analysis, which I see is like a really positive thing, because you're constantly like, it's like this notion that you can always do better. It's like just continuous learning. So that's sort of how I've had a stronger relationship with the podcast this year. I've really seen it as like a space where I can grow both in self-development and creatively.
Yeah, yeah, nice. The I can totally get on board with the. I would feel I'm doing a disservice to the world if I ever called myself a creator, because my creative skills are absolutely zero as well. Very similar. Yeah, I used to play an instrument, but that was because my mum was a music teacher, and wanted to please her.
Default.
Yeah, yeah, and so and then yeah, in terms of drawing and things like that, like I definitely wouldn't put myself in that same category, but you do have to. I think you have to be I'd see it more as like an experimenter. Like I have to constantly try
Yeah.
and create new things in the sense that yeah, once again,
Is that word
not
though? Create.
yeah, yeah, I know. It creeps in. Damn it. Test new things. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I'm doing this with the thumbnails for the book reviews, which are absurd. They're silly. They're stupid. I have a lot of fun doing them. Are they creative in a way? Yeah, I guess. But yeah, I see it more as like a scientific type of thing. Like I'm testing out things. I'm testing out a new thumbnail, testing out, I'll try testing out doing something live. Juan and I did that once, and it was just like, God damn, this is a lot of effort. Do we really want to do this? Maybe in the future, but not at
Yeah.
this moment.
No,
Yeah,
it's
and then
interesting, right?
yeah,
Sorry,
sorry,
go on.
you go.
No, I was just going to say it's interesting. Like when you think maybe like 50 to 60 years ago, podcasting did not exist, so it didn't really have a category to fall into. So I guess that begs the question: like, is it its own category now, or can we attribute it to existing categories like creatives, or is it more? Like you said, more as a business, or like what I said, a business, is it more like entrepreneurial, or is it more a sciencey thing because it's more along the experimentation path? Is it a combination of everything? I suppose it depends how you relate to it, and how you see it, right? When I put my business cap on and I'm looking at my podcast as a business, I'm thinking, how do I reach more people? How do I expand the listener base? How do I get my podcast in front of more new faces, for example? Whereas when I'm just coming from a creative point of view, I'm like, are people loving this content? How can I make more of a meaningful impact just on one person today? I'm not focusing on the numbers. So it's interesting, right? Like, do you think it falls into an existing category? Do you think it's like a new one on its own?
Well, I've been getting into this thing called podcasting 2.0 recently, and so just for your knowledge, I suppose podcasting really started about 20 years ago. It was in the early 2000s, and one of the guys who essentially created it, he had one of the first podcasts, was called Adam Curry, and he's at the moment sort of trying to revamp podcasting in the sense of adding new features to it. So there's a whole lot of things where podcasting has just been staying stagnant for a while. So for example, if I opened up my phone, used one of the apps, and I'm watching it, even though there's people who have transcripts of their audio, there's very few players where you'll actually be able to see the transcript going along down the bottom. So this is perfect for people who are hard of hearing, who have a disability of some sort. That sort of thing is perfect, but it's been nowhere. Like hasn't been created. So with that being said, like all of these things are being added where the term podcasting is becoming really loose in my mind. It used to be a pretty audio thing, but now it's like I, for example, have managed to get some of our small snippets of the videos that we create, and you can actually watch them in a podcast player. So it's sort of like turning into YouTube now. And then there's the ability coming soon to have like cross commenting across platforms, and that's turning it into more of a social area. It's like, oh God, I don't even know anymore. All these things are combining. So yeah, I sort of tend to just leave it. I don't, if you want to call your video podcast a podcast, hey, like that's a podcast for you. So yeah, I've no qualms particularly about it, but yeah, there is types though. So, the person recording in their car on their phone is definitely different from a highly produced, highly edited story, almost like a movie type thing. So yeah. How about you? Do you have any thoughts on what you define and don't define as a podcast?
I would agree that it's more of a loose term because, like you've got my partner who's like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to listen to Joe Rogan's podcast, and he whips out YouTube and watching a video. Whereas I'm
yeah.
AirPods in and I'm going for a walk, putting on whatever's on my Apple Podcasts. So I think it's more, I do see it as more of a creative space. And I think people are defining, I guess, the way they relate to it, how they like to listen, how they like to create in the space. I think it's a great thing to have that flexibility, because if not, you completely distill people's a possibility to invent, like all box situations don't allow for the unknown. So I think it's good that it's kind of a loose term, but I definitely see it as more creative just because of the variety we've got in it. And I think it's a really exciting space to be in. And I've said this time and time again, when people ask me, like, what do you think is the best thing about podcasting? Or they're kind of asking me why they should start one. So if anyone listening is thinking of starting a podcast, the one thing I would say that I've loved every minute of is that everyone in the space is just so collaborative and really giving with their time. And the way I like to see it is, if I have a listener that listens to the Mere Mortals podcast and the Balance Theory podcast, it doesn't take away from either of us, because a listener can be dedicated or devoted to as many podcasts as they want, and it doesn't divert from somebody else. Unlike, say, e-commerce businesses who sell the same product, right? If you're shopping for socks at one place, you're unlikely going to buy another pair straight away from another place. So that rivalry and that competition is nowhere to be seen in podcasting, or at least in the spaces that I've been in. And a byproduct of that is other hosts have been so, giving with their advice and sort of tips and just cross-promoting. So I think it's just a really nice space to be in because of the flexibility. And I think because of I think it's just a really genuine space. It's not like a radio where you just put it on the background just to have background noise. Like to put on a podcast is so intentional. You want to be listening to it. That captions, the headline of that episode has completely enthralled you. You're dying to hear what it's all about, or you really want to hear that particular guest, or you just love that host. It's very, very intentional. And so people are genuine with their time. Hosts have to be genuine with what they're putting out there, because you see straight through it as well. And so I just think it's a really great space to be in.
Yeah, I'd agree. I've yet to find that competition aspect in it. It's more, hey, that's cool. This person's doing something cool. Go check them out. Like, I actually really want to have the ability. So talking of these new features, I really want to have the ability to be talking about, oh yeah, so, Juan and I do this all the time. I watched your podcast or someone else's, and I'm like, oh yeah, Erika was talking about this. I'd love to have the ability to have a link pop up where someone can just click it and it'll go to that snippet of your podcast. So I'm like,
that'll be cool.
Sending them directly to you, and then maybe it plays the link and comes back to me, who knows? But that sort of stuff would, I'd totally be on board with that. That's that'd be super fun.
Yeah, that'd be awesome to like really boost like that cross collaboration in a way.
Yeah, for sure. So we're talking about a little bit, I guess, the different types and strategies. So with your one as well, so yours is more of you do a lot of things, because you have your solo episodes, you have the ones, longer ones with your guests. I see you've started to put meditation on there as well. So you're getting a bit of everything in there. Do you have any standout moments from any of the guests that you've had on? Any that you're like, wow, just this moment alone made it worth, starting and spending all the hours editing and whatnot?
Yeah, I've had like so many of those moments, and it could just be, I think it has a lot to do with my mood as well. But if I'm in like such a good place and somebody sends me a message to just appreciate an episode that they've heard, or just thank me for putting something out there, that just makes me so happy and so grateful. And it really does ground me and remind me that, because sometimes I think being consistent with a podcast when it's really slow growing can be really hard. And that's when your why for doing a podcast is so important. And I think we've got to be honest here and say, if you're doing a podcast to make money, you better be prepared to put in hard work, because it's not an easy space to just, go in and monetize off. And yeah. I think I've started it at a great point in my life where I have a stable career and I have another side hustle that kind of brings me income in a sense. And so everything I do with the podcast is purely from a place of wanting to connect with people. And so when that connection is reciprocated, for me, it's like it marries up, and I'm like, it's a match. People are seeing what I'm doing and they're vibing, and they're like, they're connecting with what I'm putting out there, and that's it. That just makes my world. And that could be honestly as simple as someone just leaving a review or sending me a message directly on socials. And of course, like other moments have been in particular episodes where I've really connected with a guest more than what I thought I would. like I genuinely reach out to guests that I've read their books, so I've been following them on socials, or they also have a podcast, just something that's drawn me to them already. So there's already that baseline connection. But when they also sort of connect with me, we're really, really connecting and vibing. And, once the recording's done, we're on there chatting for half an hour. That for me is also something else. I think, wow, I never would have had this conversation or met this person or had the opportunity to have a conversation with them had it not been for the podcast. It's just such a nice stepping stone. Like you and I, our paths were very unlikely to ever have crossed. And we support each other on social media, and we touch base every now and again. And that's so nice as well. So just all the little friendships that have come with it, all the messages here and there, they really do add up to fueling my why and making it stronger and stronger every day. So that's been so nice.
Yeah, it's definitely a vow of poverty at least for the start. With your guests, as a rough ratio, would you say how many of the people that you reach out to actually end up appearing on the show? So how much because it's really easy to just see like, oh, Erika's got this girl on or this guy on, and it's a weekly thing. Man, must seem so easy, but man, I've barely done that many conversations, probably half of what you've done, and it's almost tedious in a way, just getting people, the schedule, the doing the research, and then someone bails out or whatnot. So what's your rough ratio of how many people you reach out to and actually end up getting on?
I haven't actually thought about that. I think so what I actually did before I even started the podcast was I did, on a piece of paper, I had 3 columns. The first one was, because I never want to be dry for guests, because I'm very much guest oriented. I have a guest on every single week except the first Monday of every month. So that's a lot of people I have to schedule in. So what I did before I started was I put, as I said, the 3 columns. The first one was people I want to interview that I know would say yes. So that's people I have already a relationship with. They're a friend, they're a family member, there's someone who I already know definitely they're going to be coming on the podcast. And that took up a lot of the initial guest list. Then I had a middle section, which was like, I'm going to have to reach out to this person because I don't have that familiarity with them like I do like a good friend, but they're probably going to say yes because we, have a mutual friend, or we've kind of exchanged conversation before, something like that. Like I'm pretty sure they'll say yes, but I'll probably still have to reach out to them. And then the third column was people I would love to interview that I've never connected with. Maybe it's like more a brand owner, an author, and I'm going to have to pitch to them. So what I did at the start was I tried to sort of keep most of my interviews in the first 2 whilst reaching out to the third column, as I went. And then I just kept adding to it every time like new guests popped up. If anyone came up that I'm like, oh, that would be a really good guest, I just kept adding them to the list. And being ahead with the episodes is definitely a great tip here. In terms of reaching out ratio, I haven't really had that many people say no. I think I've definitely had some no replies. But when I do, I kind of like to batch the way I do the podcasting. So I was in between jobs in July. And so I had about a week off and I just bulk recorded that week. So June, start of July, I was like bulk reaching out to people. And so I don't know, I haven't really taken inventory of who hasn't replied in a way, because some people are like, we would love to, but we just don't have the time. So I don't really see that as a no. I'm like, I've just put them I put that email in a folder in my inbox that says guests to reach out to. Yeah. And, in a couple of months, I just go back in, I look at when the last conversation was and I say, hey, is now a good time or whatever. But I think this is actually good that you've asked me this, because I think a lot of people will be like, oh, they didn't reply. They said no, like that sucks. That hurts. You just can't take it personally. Like some people may really want to come on the podcast. They just don't have the time. Like I love Jay Shetty. I listen to his podcast. I'm currently reading his book. And he said on one of his episodes the other day, he's like, I'm actually saying no to all interviews at the moment, not because I want to, because I love going on podcasts. It's because I'm writing this book. And if I'm giving a lot through interviews, because when I'm in an interview, like I just give so much myself, I know that I'm going to be dry, or I guess have less energy to write, and I need to get in the writing zone. So you just never know with timing, when you ask somebody what their reasoning is, and it could just be they're going through a really tough personal time, whatever the case is. So I think like don't really focus on the ratio of who says yes, who says no. I think ask enough people that you get enough yeses and you have those opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. And it depends, like you said, on the person, what they're feeling like on the day. You know, if whatever happens, that email goes into whatever inbox. I sometimes get really random ones where it's like, you know, it's on the borderline, but you can sort of tell that it's a batch email, and so you're like,
a response,
yeah. I'm not. If you like make it silly in a way, so at least so I know that it's a human on the other end. Otherwise, I'm just thinking like, what's going on here?
Yeah, but I think like another tip, especially if you have someone quite high profile and you think, oh, it'd be so great if they could say yes, but it'd be like a long shot. Just start engaging with them on socials, like as a pretext. So they see your Instagram popping up, they see your name. So by the time you go around and asking, you know, there's already that familiarity. It may not guarantee you a yes, but you know, you've got to like massage sometimes people into it. Or I think it's really all about the way you ask. And I don't really have a template that I like bulk use for every single guest. Like I definitely have a little spiel about what my podcast is about, but I do find myself changing that depending on how it relates to that person. Because you just have to be intentional at the end of the day. Like if you want to have a guest on your podcast, just tell them why. Tell them why you think that they would give your audience such great value and why you two would have a great conversation. And I don't know, I just feel like that works most of the time.
Yeah. Nice. Do you have an interaction with an audience or a person who listens that stands out for you? Something that just made you go like, whoa, that's cool.
Yeah, I do have this one listener. He has an Instagram page, and it's all about like mindfulness for men. So he's a father. And to be honest with you, when I started my podcast, I was thinking, okay, who's my ideal listener? Because in my mind, I was like, whenever I get lost or I'm trying to think of examples, this is who I want to be speaking to, just so I can keep it consistent. So I was thinking like someone around my age, late 20s, full-time worker, loves to, you know, like let their hair down on the weekend, but super health conscious. I was just sort of putting a little image on it. So when this particular individual reached out to me, I was like, wow, like my podcast is reaching people I didn't even think would fall in that category of listeners. So that was like a wow moment. But the reason I really love our kind of relationship is every now and again, he's quite active on his page and shares a lot of content, but he will actually put up a really nice post and do like a nice write-up of the episode and what he really liked about it. And then he goes and engages with that guest as well. So he's really like does quite intentional posts and always kind of gives me, you know, his take on what he's listened to. But I think the biggest wow moment was like, oh my God, this is like a guy in his 30s who's a dad, like so far removed from who I thought I was speaking to. So that was really cool. That was awesome.
Yeah, that's super fun. Similar thing for us. I think our original, you know, we didn't intentionally try to set out the podcast for this audience, but I was thinking like, we'll probably get people like us,
people
I
like
guess.
you.
So,
yeah,
maybe even a little bit younger. So like early 20s men. That was probably what we were thinking. The most feedback I've had from is middle-aged women in their, you know, sort of 40s or 30s to 50s, and as of right now, our listener base is primarily in India, of all places. Like I don't know why.
wow.
But and it's not just a small bit as well. It's like a larger one. So it's strange what you attract as well when you're just doing things like, for whatever reason, like you'll get people like this, and it's like, whoa, okay, wasn't expecting that. I'm super glad as well. It's kind of cool. Like nice to know that I'm not just appealing to one one audience type or one type of person.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, like I obviously can see like where you're charting. And so when all the different countries come up, that was like another moment for me. I'm like, oh my God, like, yeah, of course. Like I'm not just going to attract people in Australia just because I'm Australian. Like people speak English all around the world. It just didn't occur to me. Like I think where it just gets in such a bubble, and you really do think, I think it's quite normal to think, oh, I'm just speaking to people who are like me because they're sort of at my place in life, but you just never know who your content will resonate with at different points in their life. And I suppose because my theme, or I guess my concept, is so broad and applicable no matter where you're at in life, it's just kind of shown me the reach that it can have. But that was a really cool realization for me, as I'm sure it was for you guys too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. One thing I wanted to ask was, what do you visualize when you think of balance? So, what pops up in your mind in terms of like an object or and a visualization of what that is?
I think the most instant thing that comes to mind for me is just like a circle. And that's because I like the continuity of it. A circle, something, just keeps going around and around. And you're kind of, if you imagine yourself, I'm just sort of letting this out as it's coming into my mind because I'm just trying to tell you what's coming into my head. I haven't really thought about this in depth, but I'm thinking like if you're on the edge of the circle, kind of going around it, almost like imagine you're flying around the earth, like you never really know what's ahead, right? There's always unexpectedness, but you just keep going around. So it's this concept that like your balance, you're always going to keep going around, but you never know what's ahead. Just kind of bringing in that element of flexibility to say, hey, this was my balance yesterday. I may have been here before, but my balance may look different, and just having that flexibility and saying, I know it's an ongoing thing that I just need to sort of deal with one day at a time. Even if it's as micro as what does my balance look like today? Or what does my balance need today? That sort of would probably be the best visual I can give, because I don't like the idea of a scale, because it's not about weighing the parts of your life in exactly the same way. And a scale almost is like if you have, say, more weighting on your fulfillment area and your health and relationships up here, that also implies they're not as important as each other, which is not true at all. Like they're all as equal as each other. It just depends how much time you have to put in each of those areas at any given moment. So away with the scales, I'm going to roll with the circle.
Yeah, nice. That might be worth exploring because I have a totally different one. I was imagining more of I'm not sure what the technical name for it, but the Swiss ball where it's been cut in half and it's like a black flat top surface, and you usually jump on that and sort of balance. And so imagine if you put a marble in the middle, it'll tend to one corner, it'll sort of meander around different areas of it, but you probably want to be trying to get it to that middle point is the ideal point, but you'll never exactly reach it. And if you do reach it, you're not going to stay there because you're going to go off in some other way. But I was listening to your conversation with Jacques on a couple of lattes, and he was imagining a interconnected series of seesaws and all these sorts of things. So yeah, I think
he went deep. He went deep there.
Yeah. So I think
and look, I think this conversation serves nicely to just prove even further that everyone's idea of balance is so unique, and whatever that looks, if yours is a scale, there's nothing wrong with that. It just means then, do you see that as guilt when one thing is outweighing another? And even just that concept of areas of your life outweighing one another, does that bring guilt into your life that you don't need? Should it be more about owning that that's where it's at, and it's not necessarily a bad thing? I was always told, you work too much, you don't chill out enough, you just got to chill out. And I just got so frustrated being told that, because there's something so soothing for me about doing things that I'm passionate about. It's such a happy place for me, and I make time to meditate and exercise every single day. They're my things that ground me. I take my time when I'm in the shower, just intentional things so when I have all the other hours in my day, I can dedicate them to doing what I got to do. And that's what my balance looks like. So yeah, whatever your visual of balance is, I think just own that. It doesn't have to be, what I've said, what you've said, what Jacques said. It's just whatever makes most sense to you. And I think what doesn't make you feel guilty for not doing. I think that's the biggest thing here. It's removing the guilt and more owning the balance.
Yeah. If you ever ask your audience that, I'd love to see some of the responses, because I can imagine all sorts of things. Like, maybe some people would do it in a more of a color scale. So, going from, red to green, or I'm sort of feeling like this, maybe more of a, even a, squiggly line or something. I think that I can just imagine there'd be many, many ways that people would visualize what it is that you really talk about on your show, and that whole concept of balance, for sure.
Well, you know what I'll have to do? I'll have to get this little snippet off you and I'll pop it on my socials. So when you guys are watching this on my social media, you'll have to comment below and let us know what your visual of balance is, so we can get an idea.
Perfect. That would be super cool. As well as one of the things I'm really starting to get into is value. So what is, I suppose, the problem with me is for our podcast in particular, the Mere Mortals, I'm not really trying to solve anything. Like, I'm not trying to fix someone's problem or show this. This is more like, and even I don't particularly know, and I probably should figure that out because I spend so much time on it. But what would you say, like, if someone came onto your show, like what would be the value do you think they would find within that?
I think the biggest value the balance theory gives is giving people the okay or the flexibility to define and own their own idea of balance. And so we do that through having conversations with such a variety of people, and through like my Monday Muse, which is the first episode of every month, I really take that opportunity to talk about concepts that I think a lot of us struggle with when it does come to balance. For example, dealing with fear or getting started, or why is gratitude so hard? Things like that can kind of eat into the guilt associated with balance. So I think bottom line, the value is you will get sort of tools and tips on how to own and define your own idea of balance.
Nice. Awesome. With that, I think we'll leave that for the podcasting side of things. So maybe a little bit, some more the personal. I don't think I've actually heard your sort of growing up story. So from just the basic details of where you grew up and what life was like for you and your family.
Sure. So we've actually moved. Well, I've lived in 14 different houses.
Oh my God.
Look, I won't take you through the journey of each of them, but essentially I was born in Melbourne.
No, please do, like architecture of each one, how each made you feel,
Sure. No, I'll give you the highlights reel. So we grew up in Melbourne. My dad, we moved here to Sydney just before I started primary school. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. So for like my first 8 years, my mum just always seemed to be pregnant.
Yeah.
And then my parents, they got divorced when I was in year 6. And then they got remarried to each other when I was in year 8. And then they re-divorced each other when I was in year 12.
Oh,
so that's sort
complex.
Yeah. So hence all the moves. And I know that sounds quite traumatic, but we're actually a really tight-knit family now. We're all very, very close. But that's sort of the backbone to, I guess, my movements growing up. I was always quite academic at school, like always loved doing all the extracurricular things. Played a bit of sport. I was a netballer. I did, what else? Yeah, I actually really just enjoyed school, but I always had this really nice, I hate to use the word, but balance between a social life and school. And I used to use my social life as like a reward for studying. So for me, it was like, I'm going to put my head down and study all day Saturday because I know I've got a party tonight and I want to, go and just get drunk, literally. And I was like, but I've got to earn it. And so I would use that as like my motivation to put my head down and study. And so during the week, I kind of always had this really good discipline and I guess value on doing well at school and just being quite academic. I really did put value on that, but I also didn't want to compromise my social life. So I kind of used the two to fuel one another, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And so I really do feel like I had the best of both worlds at school. Like I was quite sociable and I was, friends with a lot of people in my year group, but I was also quite studious. So I think that's because I had that nice push and pull and used the two, I guess, in confluence with another. And when I was in primary school, I always said I wanted to be a lawyer because that's what people told me I'd be good at. I didn't actually put much thought to it. I was like, yeah, it sounds like a mad job. Like you always see it on TV shows and stuff. And then, I don't know, through high school, I think I lost that connection because I stopped doing debating, as you go through high school, all girls high school. Anyone listening who's been to one will know what I'm talking about. You sort of, I guess, merge into what the masses are doing just to fit in and do all the things. And so it was definitely a little bit of a lost period there where I wasn't really thinking about what I wanted to do. So I wasn't debating or doing any public speaking or anything like that. And then come HSC time, I knew I loved English, like as a subject. And I love traveling. I can speak Italian. I really wanted to learn Spanish, which I understand because I speak Italian, but I completely botch it when I give it a crack.
Yeah, I'm the same. I can sort of semi-understand Italian, but I would not be able to speak it at all.
Yeah. So when it comes to Spanish, for me, it's entiendo más que hablo, and that's it.
Muy bien, muy bien.
But so I was like, okay, traveling, writing, like maybe I'll just do like a media communications with like an international studies degree, something like that. And then when I was applying for the courses through UAC, I remember like something just came over me and I was like, just put law back in, because if you get the marks, like who cares? Then you can just decide later. Just put it in as your top preference, because it's the hardest one to get into, and just see how it goes. So I put in media and law at the top and I got in. And I was like, okay, well, looks like I'm doing that. And I just decided then it was a great degree. It would have just opened up a lot of doors. Like I wasn't really tied to being a lawyer. But in hindsight, I'm so glad I did the degree, not because I ended up being admitted and becoming a solicitor, but it just taught me a lot about hard work and perseverance and time management. And it's a very, very tedious degree. It involves a lot physically, mentally, but it has opened so many doors. And I think doing that really has set up a base where I can really now just go into any avenue that I like. So that's sort of all the way up to uni. I did a lot of traveling during uni, which God seems like ages ago now when you think about being on the beach in Croatia, or, partying in Ibiza and stuff like that. But definitely had my fair share of traveling, which I'm super grateful for. And through uni, I was able to do a month of volunteer work in Nepal, which was awesome. I did a month in South America with my family, which is where they're actually from. My mum's from Argentina, which was beautiful. And so, did a bit of traveling after uni, started working, and that brings us close to date. But I guess the last 2 years have been quite formative for me, in the sense of, I think you go through uni and you think, okay, I've studied this. This is what I'm going to do. This is who I am. I'm a lawyer, and that's what I've got to do. But something just didn't feel right to me. I couldn't see myself doing it long term. Not that I didn't enjoy it. Like I hadn't even dipped my toes in, but I was like, the corporate environment is just missing something for me. And I could tell it was that people element, the meaningful connection with other people, to a point where you can like hear their stories. Because I should give a bit of context. I'm in banking, finance, law. So it's not as though I'm dealing with, families in family law, or criminals and like more emotional sort of stuff. It's quite transactional, they call it. It's more back-end transactional stuff. And so I was like, I had this inner calling to just do something to connect me with people. And it wasn't really something I thought about in a good 7 years since I finished school, because I feel like you just, head down HSC, go straight into uni, 5 years of that. It was actually 5.5 years of study. And I didn't really resurface to think, well, what do I actually want to do? I just sort of put my head down and went through the degree. So I think about 2 years into working, that was when I stopped, and I was like, okay, I need to do something, because this inner calling is not leaving me alone. When they say like you ignore like a calling from your body, and it'll just get louder and it'll just get louder until it's basically screaming in your face. And so I thought, what am I going to do? So I'd actually done my Cert 3 and 4 in fitness whilst I was at uni, and I was PTing a little bit on the side, just because I fell into the health and fitness space as a passion, and I really enjoyed it. And my girlfriend was like, I really want to do it too. And we had friends asking us to do like classes for them. So I'm like, go and do your course, and then we can run sessions together. So that's when we started ES Fit, which was 2019, about 2 years ago now. And that was just boot camps. And that was great, because I would just do them on a Saturday morning. We did a little bit of stuff on social media, nothing too intense. That was a good year. And then 2020 was really the year it all the stars aligned, I feel. Maybe I'll say that in 3 years' time. But at this point in my life, that's when I feel like the stars aligned. I really had the thought to do the podcast. And I can't remember if it was on our conversation or the one with Jarks. We spoke about like the process of actually doing the podcast and how it came to be.
Yeah, I think that was with me.
Yeah. So you'll probably hear that if you listen to the other episode. But it was one of those things, the idea of it freaked me out. Like, I don't know if you had a moment where you thought, oh, could I do a podcast, and how you felt? But I was like, this is so random. Like, am I going to do a podcast? Like, this is just so strange. But I had this like super calmness about it. I was like, it just felt so aligned. It felt like, that's freaky. Like, that's freaking me out. But it also feels so right at the same time. It's like forbidden fruit. You just want it.
Yeah, I think it's because you see, like, you'll always come into it, and there'll have people who've blazed a path already. So you're thinking, and you attach other things to it. So like, you might be thinking of, oh man, I'm not sure if I want a podcast, but you'll actually be thinking of a YouTuber or something who's really, vlogging about their whole life, and then you put that and you're like, oh, is that what a podcast is? Like, I don't want to do that. So yeah. It's definitely something a bit more out there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, look, I'll be completely honest. I hadn't even listened to a podcast at that moment. I just knew what they were and what they were about. Well, I thought, well, my skills are I'm a great communicator and I want to connect with people in a meaningful way. So I can do that through a platform where I can, just deliver content and then engage with people outside of that and, kind of grow it from there. And I thought it could just be a fun project. And if I just do it and it goes nowhere, who cares? Like, I've just tried something new. That was sort of my mentality. But that was also the year when COVID hit, which was a blessing in a way. Look, obviously a blessing and a curse. Blessing for the podcast because a lot of people picked up listening to podcasts. They were walking a lot more. So I think it was a great time to start. And hand in hand with that, we also took ES Fit, which was just boot camps, which obviously had to stop as well. And we just started doing a lot of online stuff, which then transitioned into an e-commerce store because of the traction we kind of got, which has been lovely to have as a project now during the second lockdown where everyone's wanting at-home equipment. So it's kind of all worked out quite well. But essentially last year was a big, just really like finding my feet with what I want to do. And so, yeah, that's sort of the story of how I grew up. Sorry, I've kind of taken it full circle back to present day. But yeah, that's sort of my little journey to date.
Perfect. No, there's a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. So what was it that people were already identifying about you when you were in primary school that said like, oh, you'd be perfect for a lawyer?
I could write really well. And I was pretty confident, like speaking. I'd always be like, I always like shotgun first and second speaker in debating because like I wanted to do the longest part. I didn't want to be the third speaker that just concluded what everyone else said. Like I had to say like my piece and make sure I gave it my oomph.
Yeah, I
think it was that combined with like I loved reading and writing as well. And they're like, yep, lawyer. Which I think is so bad to like box in kids into like this is your job. Like, really growing up, you think that this world has like 5 careers that you can go into. You're like builder, doctor, lawyer, I don't know, hairdresser. You just, I think, I don't know, maybe that was just me and my sort of upbringing, but it was quite like narrow in terms of the opportunities. But I think we just live in a time now where you can literally make up your own job description if you really wanted to. It's just changing at such a fast pace. And there's so much opportunity with the advent of the internet that, our grandparents had no opportunity. Like they were seriously, industrial revolution. You had a trade, you went to work, your output was your value, that sort of thing. But we just don't live in that time anymore. So it's kind of cool to see that that's no longer the box I've fit myself into.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's everything is progressing super, super quickly. And last time I heard it was sort of the average person nowadays, the millennials will have 10 plus
7 careers
different,
just it's gone up.
Ridiculous amount of stuff. I actually had a similar experience in high school where not related to career wise, but it's almost like there's something about that period that can just beat the hell out of you for doing something that you love. So for me, it was reading. I was an avid reader in primary school, Del Toro Quest, Harry Potter books, the classic sort of stuff. Yeah. And then
Del Toro Quest, that takes me back.
Yeah. That was a good series. And then
I wonder if everyone that's read Del Toro Quest is now podcasting. I'm kidding.
yeah, that'd be funny. That'd be a good correlation. And then then high school happened, and I started to have to read shit that I didn't care about, Shakespeare, looking for Alibrandi, et cetera. And then it wasn't until a little bit after that in uni when I sort of rediscovered like, oh wait, I actually really, really love reading. So I think there's something about that process of high school, which and like you said, boxing people in, there's I didn't have that so much, but I can definitely see how as a kid you're just super impressionable. So if people say like 3 things that you in common, then you'll be like, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to do that. And, add some certainty to your future because you just have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. And like you just said, that's actually a really good point. Like I definitely fell out of touch with reading during high school too, because I was like, And uni was even worse because there's so much reading with a law degree that I was
Yeah, for sure.
felt guilty if I was reading a novel, because I was like, I could be reading like the hundreds of pages that I've got as my homework.
Learning
So
this
you just
obscure
fall out
by
of touch.
law.
Yeah, like you just end up developing this sort of negative relationship with it for a while because it's more of a burden and a chore than it is a choice. But when you can have the breathing room, and look, again, at that point in time, that's what I had to do. That's what the degree entailed. And so my reading time had to be that sort of content. But the second I got out of it, gave myself some time, and then I got back on the reading horse, and now I just love it. I'm aiming for about 20 a year at the moment.
Nice. I asked you about this last time, and I think you told me one you were reading at the present. What's a book that has been most influential, or the most fun favorite from your, let's just say, reading career?
I'm going to give a recent one just because it's fresh in my mind, and it's called Seize the Yay, and it's by
Sarah. Yeah,
same podcast host. Yeah, she has a podcast, Seize the Yay, Sarah Holloway. And yeah, it's just a very lighthearted, real, raw kind of book. I when I was reading it, I honestly just felt like I was speaking to her. I felt like it was my thoughts compiled in a book there for me to read. Like it was that relatable. So yeah, I really, really love that one. I felt like that gave me a lot, but I'm halfway through Jay Shetty's book, Think Like a Monk. Yep. And I'm loving that. I can't wait to go back through and like pull apart my highlighted bits and just really like dive into like my favorite bits. So that's been really good. And I think that will probably be my favorite when I'm done with it.
Nice. Yeah. I think Juan read that book. I think I've actually got it up in here somewhere.
Would recommend.
Yeah. Nice. What brings you joy? What are the things that you really, really love doing that bring a smile to your face every time you do it, or consume, or etc.?
I think this is a really nice question, especially since we've been in lockdown for 2 months. I've kind of had no distractions, and I've really been able to see what truly brings me joy away from all the events and going out and stuff like that. Honest quality time with my partner is just like number one. We just are both so busy. And so when we just get a moment and we're after dinner and we're having a glass of wine, we're just playing cards, and it's just like we're having and we just sometimes get in these moments and we just crack up laughing. That for me is like I could have nothing and have that, and I would be so happy. Like that for me is just such a genuine moment. I live for those. Like they're beautiful. That's probably one. I think when I've created something and I can see the result of it. So like we were saying before, those little bite-sized moments, even if it's just you get a message and someone thanks you for an episode, or if I've done a workout on, the ESFit page and someone's message saying, thank you so much for putting these out every week. Like I love them. Like those are nice little moments too.
Yeah, I think that's important. I've had one like that with the podcast where, we started off using this shitty GoPro camera, and I was always like, oh man, this looks so crap. It's gotten to the stage now where I watch one of our, the ones that I put on YouTube, and I'm like, this is really good. I really, really enjoy this. Probably a year or two time, I'll once again look back and be like, oh man, I could have done this, could have done that, I could have made it so much better. But being able to find that, brief, it's that finding that balance between the constantly striving forward to make it better, but also that brief enjoyment in the moment of like, this is better than it was. Oh man, this is nice.
Yeah, just appreciating how far you've come. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the only other one I'd say that is like a joy for me, and it's a more recent inclusion in my life, would be meditation. It's not even about, obviously there's so many physical benefits for meditation, but for me, it's just about having a moment for myself. It's a non-negotiable moment for myself, and that brings me joy because I think that helps me stay grounded in a lot of ways. And so that's important. In terms of my happiness as well.
Yeah. Just speaking of meditation, so it's funny, like I go through real phases where I'll want it and need it and use it, and then just completely get rid of it. I've probably done this like 3 times where I'll be constantly using it for half a year, build up to like a point. This past year was, so I don't know if you followed this, but one of my goals for this year was to do a sort of retreat for myself. So I rented an Airbnb, went there for sort of 8 days, 6 full days, and then just meditated like 8 hours a day.
Wow.
And yeah, I did that, and then was like, I'm not meditating for a while. Like I'm done.
How was that?
It was it gave me a couple of really good insights. Number one being I'm really, really striving too hard sometimes. So and needlessly striving. So my sort of personality, I like to push the box and in certain ways. So and test myself. So this past year I was like, all right, I'm gonna do a marathon and I want to do it really quick. I hate running. Like it's just not that fun for me, but it was like, I'm gonna do it. A bunch of other things like that where I was just really pressing forward, really. We talked last time about cold ice baths and cold showers. Yep. Once again, like I was doing these cold showers for no particular reason. Like I'm sure there's some physiological benefits, but that's not what I was doing it for. It was for the mental toughness. And I just went, man, what am I doing? Like this is getting too much. So, that was probably the main insight I got. And then also, you don't need it all the time. Like if you're constantly striving, then you're probably going to need to meditate to really like get your mind sorted and whatnot. It's almost like the CEOs who are super productive and things, and they're burning out, and they're like, all right, I'll use meditation as a tool to get my mind focused back on track and not burn out. And then it's also like, or you could just not work as hard and then you'll be also okay. Like, so it's it's for me, I go between those two.
I think it's like just kind of hearing you say that too, though. I think it's not necessarily just a tool for when you are feeling burnout. I think for me, when I meditate and I'm already in a good place and I already have like a quiet week, it's even more profound because I'm already coming from that place of stillness. It's just more about, for me personally anyway, it's just about having that time for myself, because it's so easy to just race through your day and not have any time for yourself. And whatever that looks like, it doesn't have to be meditation. It could be, just observing, having a walk in your garden or going to get your favorite coffee. It's just a moment for yourself. But for me personally right now, like the stillness and the quietness, I find makes a big difference in and amongst everything else I've got on.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't box it in and say it's just a tool. It's also a lifestyle. Some people will, me building up to an hour's worth of meditation a day was more of a challenge sort of thing. But for some people it's like, hey, I'm going to do 2 hours, 3 hours. And that's what brings me joy. That's what's really good. So yeah, it's a useful thing to try out if you never tried it before, for sure.
Yeah, that's very impressive. I'm definitely on a 10, 15 minute schedule. Yeah,
I'd say stick at that. I was going to ask you about some sort of practical implementations of your own values. So the three categories that you've got, the health, where did I write it down? It was health, relationships, and then the fulfillment. So what are some things that you've recently changed or implemented in across those three to find that balance a bit more?
Yeah, good question. So, and I think it's also interesting given that we've been in lockdown for 2 months. So obviously I've had to really adapt with a lot of those areas. So starting off with the health, for me, movement every day doesn't have to be a strenuous sweat-inducing workout, which I think we spoke about a lot on the last podcast. I was like smashing myself in the gym, and that for me was I've moved my body. Whereas now I'm like, I could just go for a 40-minute walk or 20-minute walk, or I could just do a little bit of mobility in the morning. But being at home, sitting a lot all day, for me, getting in that movement every day is so important, especially because I'm not, walking to the train, walking to my office. I'm not going to the gym. Like everything's very much like in and amongst my apartment. And so movement every day is definitely key. Another thing for my health would be the meditation, absolutely, daily. And the other two things, which I don't think I spoke to you about last time, sleep is essential. I just need to be in a position where I can perform every day, and perform as in just be present in whatever I'm doing. It doesn't have to be that I'm working. It could just be that I'm spending the day with my partner, but I don't want to be sluggish and not there when, Saturdays or Sundays are really our only days to just be together. And so making sure I'm getting enough sleep. And if that means that, I'm going to bed late one night, I will postpone or skip the workout in the morning and do something maybe in the middle of my day. So just having that flexibility to make sure that the important things stay the important things, And in and amongst that is diet. But I'm going to add an interesting comment in here because I think sometimes the healthiest thing you can do, or the most balancing you can do, is just have an ice cream, literally. Like, it doesn't mean you have to eat clean all day, every day. Sometimes it's about what nourishes your soul as well. And so having that flexibility with your diet, not being so regimented, it becomes a chore. Eating the foods that give you energy obviously is important, so that you're not sluggish and tired all the time, and you have the energy to do and live your life and do them at your full potential. But, giving yourself the time to enjoy an ice cream, obviously that's my go-to. I've said it twice now in like 1 minute, but whatever that looks like for you, it could be a bowl of pasta, a bowl of wine, like just having that balance literally with your diet, so that you're fueling not only your body, but your soul. I think that's very important. So that's my kind of things with health. With relationships, this has been an interesting one, because obviously being in lockdown, we're so limited for who we can see and where we can go. And so I've actually only got one sister in Sydney. The rest of my family spread out all across Australia. So that's been really hard, not being able to see them. But notwithstanding, I try and have a phone call with each of them at least once a week. And I try and make that phone call in a moment where I'm not rushed. Because there's nothing worse when you're getting a phone call from mum or dad and you're just in a rush, and you really have to just speed through it and kind of just tick it off the to-do list and just get it done with.
Yeah,
I hate that pressure.
Or trying to multitask. I did this a couple of times with a friend of mine, and just realized, man, I'm barely even speaking to him because I'm trying to edit a video at the same time or something. It's like, man, what are you doing?
You're not even listening to what they have to say. And that's what I found a lot of the time. So now I just won't answer the phone call if I'm in the middle of something else, and I'll just say, hey, I'm going to call you later. But just being intentional about the time I can give them within the limits of what we can do. So obviously we can't be together, but if I'm going to take the time to have a phone call, I make sure I'm present. With my partner, it means so it's actually, our dynamic's quite interesting. He's a chiropractor. So he's an essential worker and has been working the whole way through, which has been so lucky. But he's talking to people all day, right? He comes home, last thing he wants to do is talk. I've been at home all day, not talking. First thing I want to do when he comes home is talk. So we have to find this really gentle compromise between the way we connect at night and what we do that doesn't burn either of us out. So we've found we've been playing cards, or we've actually just started Game of Thrones, which I've been putting off because I thought that's such a big commitment, but I'm fully into it at the moment. So we just do a couple of those every week. And then, just like I said, like we just laugh sometimes, we go for walks, like just having those meaningful moments, even if it's just an hour at the end of every single day, like that's enough for me. That keeps me going. And normally outside of COVID, I'm pretty active in seeing my friends. Like that's definitely something that's a big, big part of my life and so important to my balance. And that's friends that just make me feel better after I see them. And I've had to go through a bit of a process in the last 2 years of really tuning into how I feel after I see someone or do something. Because I feel like, and I'm sure everybody listening can pick something now in their mind that they dread doing or they dread going to because of how it makes them feel. And I just thought, like, why am I doing that? We put this false like pressure or obligation on ourselves, like, oh, but I have to see them because they're friends with this person. And then like, I'm kind of always going to see them. And it's just easier if I'm just polite and just go. And, you're saying no to what you want to actually be doing just to people please, I guess, in that scenario. And so we all have had or have those friendships that probably are a little bit toxic for us. And so not having them in your life is a game changer. And that's something I've probably done more recently. Cleanse the friends list, which has been a little bit easier during lockdown. Obviously, you really don't talk to or see as many people. But I think it's super important to do things and have people in your relationship area that just add value to your life. If not, there's no reason they need to be there. It's an active choice that you make every single day. So that would be my, I guess, spin on the relationship section.
Yep.
And with fulfillment, what have I done recently? I think working from home has made it really hard to switch off because my office is here, my podcasting studio is here.
Do you have like a separate room for that, or it's just in the middle? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, podcasts I record here in my living room because I've just genuinely found the audio to be the best. My study is in a separate room, and that's where I also do like all my ESFit work. So I do try and compartmentalize in the house. So when I'm in that space, like I'm in the zone. But that's definitely been hard and something I really have to. I've been trying to like really not be on my phone as much on the weekends, because I just find it just, by the time you run through social media things, replying to comments and DMs and stuff, like you can get quite busy on there. So I think switching off the phone as much as possible, like just going for a walk and not taking it, going to the shops, watching a movie and not having it next to me, just simple things like that help me like detach, I think is important when it comes to the fulfillment.
Nice. That's some great little tips there. I didn't want to end off with this, but I don't have that many more questions. Your Monday Muse number 14, you're talking a lot about fear, and you even mentioned it just then. I guess those things that are uncomfortable and whatnot. What's something that you would fear nowadays, or if you don't feel like sharing that, maybe something a fear that you had in the past and that you've addressed?
Yeah, good question. I've actually been doing quite a lot of therapy in the last year with this. She specializes in high performance, but her background is in addiction, which I think is super interesting. And her whole, just as a quick tangent, just because I thought it was really interesting to share, she talks about addictions almost like, if you extrapolate that, it's an addictive personality. And that's what high performers have. They're addicted to the dopamine hits of success, of, hitting milestones, of ticking things off their to-do list. It's the same sort of concept, which I was like, whoa, that's so interesting in and of itself. So she sort of transformed her experience and practice with addictions, and she now specializes with high performers. But anyway, I've been doing a lot of work with her, and I guess what drew me to do this sort of developmental work was I was having a lot of these, let's call them fears, of not being good enough, of, I think it was a bit of imposter syndrome type stuff as well. And I think with fears, when you really work out where they come from, why they're presenting towards you, really that process of awareness disarms them in and amongst itself. So that's sort of the process I've gone through in the last year. So if you ask me right now what I'm fearful of, because I understand the process of how these fears are kind of formed and creep up, when they do arise, I give them kind of airtime, and I try and journal on them, and I try and just go deeper so that they don't kind of take over me and my thought process. I'm sort of more in control. Look, it's not that clear cut all the time, but it's just more a process of awareness. So for example, with the I'm not good enough fear, you look at how I was raised. For example, my mum is a perfectionist, and she was one of those parents where like you'd come home, you get 98 out of 100, and she'd say, oh, that's really good. What happened to the 2 marks? Like it was, nothing's ever kind of good enough. Same as like the house. I found myself like trying to clean up and do nice things for her. And, she'd always point out the things that were not done. And so growing up, I was always sort of in this position of thinking that nothing I ever did was good enough. And I'm not blaming her. There were obviously other interactions I had in social settings, in school, pressure I put on myself, beliefs and things I formed around that strengthened and fueled that belief. But it sort of came to a head then when I found myself doing all these things like the podcast or running a business, where I had this imposter syndrome. So I guess in really, really short form, these fears live in our subconscious. So subconsciously, I'm thinking I'm not good enough. Consciously, I'm doing a podcast, I'm connecting with other people, I'm e-commercing, getting a new job in my law firm, which was conflicting with the belief that I wasn't good enough. So I felt this tension, and that fear was growing because something wasn't in alignment. So I really had to do a lot of work to disarm that thought of I'm not good enough, because I was doing all these things that were really, as I said, like contradicting that thought. And it's not really a process I could probably explain in the remaining 5-10 minutes. But essentially, when you dive in and understand why that fear is living there, where it came from, you can decide whether it's fact or not. And I think the biggest aha moment for me was thinking, and I think I certainly do this still. You have a thought and there's suddenly a veracity or truth behind it just because it's in your head. You never stop and question or think like, do I have to believe that? Do I have to is that actually true? I just thought, well, it's in my head, like that's the truth, or that's what I actually think, or, but when things pop up now, I'm like, is that something I want to believe? Is that something I want to hold as truth? Am I going to give that airtime? And if not, where the hell did that come from? Or why is it coming up? Is it alluding to maybe another fear or desire or something I haven't dealt with? So I think putting on a bit more of a curiosity cap when it comes to fear, rather than taking it as, oh, well, that's, for example, if we go with the I'm not good enough example, rather than looking at that and going, well, that's true, I'm not actually good enough because that's my fear. It's putting the cap on and going, okay, well, where did that come from? Do I actually think that about myself? Yes. Why? No. Why? And then trying to rewrite and disarm it sort of in that process. So that's sort of been my, I guess, experience with it in the past year. But I think that particular Monday Muse episode was a lot more practical in terms of, I go through a little framework of how to actually disarm that fear. So if that is something you're struggling with, then that framework might be useful to you. If you want to maybe pop a link to that episode for anyone listening, or you can send me a DM and I'm happy to link it to you. But obviously, if it's something really deep-seated, more traumatic, then that's maybe when you need to engage a professional. And I'm all for those sorts of services. I think they're out there, and we're humans, we're herd type species. We're meant to help each other, and no one goes through life without the help of somebody else. So it's never shameful to ask.
Yeah, for sure. There's quite a few things in there, but I think just examining your fears, and there's usually something underneath it. So, and for me, it's funny, like they all tend to come back to a roughly big one that I've had in the past, which was just fear of rejection, I think, of sort of being outside of the group and things like that. So like 10 years ago, talking to like a girl at all would have just been like a no-go for me. Hell no. Traveling South America, very similar thing. Like you go, or Latin America, you're going to go there, you're going to not know the language, you're not going to be able to speak to people, like you're going to be an outsider to the max. And then even now, you were, thank you for sharing that first of all, and then I'll provide one as well, because I feel guilty not just asking people that and then not sharing my own, which is probably at the moment like the thing that would give me the most uncomfortable level would be dancing. I don't dance much. I've never been a dancer. Every time in the past that I've tried, there's I've even had people saying like, dance as if no one's watching. You dance, someone watches, and then they'll give a comment and be like, man, you're so weird. Or, those sort of little things have cropped up. And it's a similar thing for me. If I look at it deeply, it'll go down to like that deep-seated root of just, not being comfortable in groups, I would say is probably my main one. And then it's like, well, you could go fix that. Sort of like I found I can't really fix that, but I can fix the things that are related to that. So, speaking to women, well, if you just go out and practice doing that, you can sort of conquer that. If you go traveling, well, yeah, you can conquer that. And there's the small steps that leading up to it. So yeah, me personally, I think I'm going to have to start doing a little bit of dancing, learning how to dance, going out to some places and just tick it off. It's good every now and then to do those really uncomfortable things that you dislike and that you're fearful of, and then just be like, all right, fuck it. I'm going to do it. I got to tackle this.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that as well. It's like just not to take yourself so seriously. I think because I'm sort of the same, like, yeah, like I love dancing as well, but I'm literally like a pile of awkward limbs, which is unfortunate because I have like South American blood.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's really
like a disappointment. Argentinians listening would be shaking
disappointment to my ancestors. I know I'm going to blame the Italian side for it. But like sometimes it's just like, does it make you feel good? Who cares what other people say? I think you've just got to let go. But the only other thing I would add to that, so like you said, for example, for you, it's like, say you feel that embarrassment or outsiderness in groups. I think sometimes it can be, and look, this is caveat, it's not going to apply for all situations, but for something like guilt, embarrassment, shame, those sorts of emotions, I feel like if you just sit with them, let them surface, they do their thing. I think growing up, we're told if you're angry, like just calm down, just get over it. Or if you're embarrassed, guilty, shame, all of that, we're told to just push it to the side, to just like kind of not deal with it, just sort of move on, be happy, those sorts of things. But what I've learned growing up is that those emotions are surfacing because you've had a physical reaction or an emotional reaction to something. They just need to surface and do their thing. And the more you fight it, the stronger they get, you know, because they're sitting there. I kind of imagine it like a balloon coming up underwater. You just keep pushing it down, it's just going to keep coming up. So sometimes we just need to sit. So when people say sit with your thoughts, that sounds bloody scary, but it's just could be a question of, okay, I had this actually experience the other night. I was in such a good mood. And it's funny you said dancing. I literally like put on my camera and I just recorded myself dancing. So I was going to send it to my partner and be like, oh my God, like whatever, I'm just in such a good mood. And I just wanted to send this to you. And he was like, kind of made a comment like, you're such an awkward dancer, right? Or something like that. And I was like, felt so embarrassed about it. And then I was like, hang on a minute. I was like, and then I just thought like, why am I so embarrassed? All right, I'm embarrassed right now because he thought I look like shit. And I was like, you know what? I know I look a bit awkward anyway. And I felt so good doing it, whatever. I'm just like going to remove the seriousness of this. It's not even a big deal. Like, and it wasn't like he was saying it to tear me down. He just sort of made a fleeting comment, which
offhand comment.
all
Yeah. And that's what they usually are. Just an offhand comment that you
attach to because it's a trigger for a fear or a belief you've got, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But once you can look at that and go, whatever, he just made that comment. Did I feel good doing it? Yes. I feel embarrassed now because it conflicts with, I guess, how I felt about the event. I'm just going to let it go. Like, I'm just going to let that surface. I acknowledge, yep, I feel embarrassed about that. And then just, and it ends up sort of disarming. It's a weird process. It's like, where do I feel it in my body? Okay, it's there. It's just giving it time to surface is the best way I can describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think introspection is probably like the number one skill if you want to, I think just live a good life, you need to be able to introspect because you'll find out the things that you're doing wrong that are hurting other people. And then also the things that you're doing wrong to yourself that's hurting you. So,
and I love that part about self-development. It's like, it's not just what you learn about yourself. It's you learn how you treat others or how you show up for others or that empathy piece of why others may be doing things the way they are.
Yeah, definitely. Understanding yourself and then you can understand the world through that for sure. Perfect. Erika, thank you so much for joining me once again.
My pleasure.
Where do you want to direct people to if they want to learn more about you and your podcast? What's the best way to go?
Definitely Instagram. So the handle is @TheBalanceTheory. And then I've got my personal Instagram sort of in that bio if you do want to connect with me personally. But I'm pretty avid on social media. So, feel free to reach out. Or if you want to chat about anything that we've discussed today as well, I love getting to know new people. So don't be shy.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll catch up in a year's time.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.